is there an extra document package? Anybody have an extra?
No, this is from me.
You got mine. You want
This is
mine?
everything that I brought.
So, okay, so John has his,
Wouldn't
John's
there be
offering,
9?
Joyce, John's offering his up, he's got it on computer, and we'll just, he's a gentleman, unlike me.
Only for a small fee to balance things.
40 cents.
40 cents.
He did shuffle the pages, though, so.
Thank you.
I did. Here's this one right here. Bring that back down. But it had my name on it, so.
All right,
Oh,
there
we're
you go.
good?
All right,
All right.
See, like I said, we're
we
shuffling the
figured it out.
pages.
So who's on first
All
and
right.
what's on second?
All right. I apologize for starting a little late. We had some technical difficulties with the Zoom. We'll get right started. So we're going to discuss the remaining town meeting warrant articles. We'll finish our discussion, and we should have votes on the remaining articles tonight. If you pull out the table in your meeting packages, has the blue text in it. I believe those are the articles that remain to be discussed and voted. I would ask Mr. Gazinski just to kind of be at the ready in case, in the event that we have, need explanation if anything has changed. I know that there was a slight change from the select board meeting on Monday, not a monetary change, but just kind of an approach requested by the Council on Aging. We may as well start with that, Mr. Gazinski, unless you think we should start someplace else. Actually, we'll start with Article 2. I think we can get right into Article 2. Mike, no changes?
Yes,
Ready to
thank you,
go?
Mr. Chairman. Mike Kaczynski, Town Administrator. Is Article 2. Hopefully you all received the updated motions. Article 2 is, the dollar figures are fully listed to transfer from the different accounts. So it would be, the request of the town meeting would be to transfer from town general government $42,000, from Health and Human Services $43,858.64.
You don't need to read it, because
Okay.
we're gonna go right in. I think we're gonna have a motion, and we're gonna vote it.
All right.
Nothing,
There's nothing unusual or
okay.
special about it.
Okay.
We usually have transfers that we do every May
Yep.
town meeting to balance out the end of the fiscal year.
okay. I will take a motion, and actually, I'll take the motion from
Me.
Mr. Lohr.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Lohr.
I move that the town vote to transfer from the following accounts the sums of money listed below to fund additional wages and expenses to the accounts listed below, which were not sufficiently funded under Article 3 operating budget of the May 2nd, 2022 annual town meeting. Would you like me to read through those?
No. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the town vote, that the committee vote to recommend Article 2 as moved, and discussion. And I'll just say that this is fairly standard where the budgets are estimates from the previous year, from FY '23, and the town it's routine that there are transfers between budget lines, especially during the last month of the fiscal year, when we would, when it was authorized that we do this in order to balance the budget. And you'll notice that those two lines do balance. So there's no additional funding being requested. It's really just a accounting mechanism. Any,
Free cash.
sorry?
Other than free cash.
Other than free cash. Yes, that's right. Ms. Harden. Ms. Harden. Microphone?
Are these numbers available somewhere in the packet? And I didn't see them.
They are in the motion packet, our draft
They're not-
motion packet.
They're not in the ones that was online.
These numbers were just finalized today, so these were just sent out to the committee today. So the packet should be complete with the exception of this one page, and we can certainly add that online, but it was more so, it was just completed.
Ms. Harden, do you want a moment to look at them?
They're available
And-
on the town website.
And they are online, right, as of currently right now in the meeting materials and the Finance Committee link. So, okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 9-0. Okay, moving to Article 3.
Mr. Chairman, this is the general omnibus budget article. The sources of funding are pretty consistent with what the past years, and they're listed in the motion for a total budget of $41,855,721.
Okay, would you, before we get into discussion, would you kindly synopsize the change, the allocation of additional funding that was made to the Council on Aging as a result of the vote by the Select Board on Monday?
Absolutely. So at the Select Board meeting on Monday, I think as the Finance Committee was aware, they had been looking at the Council on Aging budget. Originally, they were looking at adding some additional hours to the director, the dispatch, and the outreach worker in the department. And after some review of the budget, it was determined that it might be more beneficial for the department with really the same amount of funding, the $15,000, to take the outreach worker and make it a program manager, operations manager / outreach worker position at 35.5 hours, and not make the additional increases on those other positions. So again, there's no additional benefits, because that position is already full-time. It would simply use those funds to boost that one position versus adding hours to the other three.
Okay. Any more questions before I take a motion? And I'll take a motion.
On the entire operating budget, Mr. Chair, or just the Council on Aging?
Just the entire budget. Any and all. Now's the time.
We're not doing indirect costs now.
They're all related, so I'm not going to tell you that we're not doing indirect costs. There are indirect costs that go into the enterprise fund. They come out of the operating budget, so now's the time. Kathy?
I'd like to have a discussion first off on the indirect costs, Mr. Chair, and I'd ask, I believe the DPW director was invited tonight to brief the Finance Committee on what indirect costs are for the new members and how the funds were allocated.
Sorry it was late, but I'm sure we were doing this tonight.
Mr. McKay, if I could just preface my comments by a few things, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
The first comprehensive study for the DPW enterprise funds was prepared for the Board of Selectmen it began in 2017 by Mr. McCaffrey, Ms. Barnes, and myself. Page 2 of the report states that, number 3C states that the indirect cost methodology was developed in 2011. I call your attention to 2011. Section 3K of the report states that the Finance Committee, quote, "should have a role in reviewing and assessing the methodology." And that's what I'd like to do tonight, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I wonder if I should just ask my questions of the DPW director, or I don't know how you'd like to proceed, Mr. McKay.
So I guess that maybe we can start with, thank you for, that we can have this discussion tonight. I think what you have in front of you is the indirect costs for FY '24.
Can you show us what it looks like?
That's that front page.
Okay, we just
That's
got
the
this
FY
in.
'24 indirect costs. What are indirect costs?
I'm going to just stop you real quick. Deirdre, do you have a copy of this, and was it posted? We're looking at a
Yes.
spreadsheet that Mr.
Yes, it's
McKay
actually
gave
on
us.
the town's website.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
It's all right. So
I
indirect.
can pull it up.
Mr. McKay?
So the indirect costs are taken from the enterprise funds, and they help assist paying for, and you can see the breakdown of all the departments listed there. And this year, the indirect cost will be a sum of $728,503, which will be taken, I take my glasses off,
Jim, where do you see that 725 number?
right in that
Thank
green
you.
line. And
Thank you.
what the meaning for that is it's a 2.5% increase over last year's allotment, which was, I mean, we can go back, I mean, it was $710,735 in FY '22. Wait a minute, I'm sorry, FY '23. FY '23 and FY '24 is the 728,503. What this is a breakdown. If you look at the town administrator's office, we'll just use that as the top line. The salaries line item and their expense line item is $517,955. Out of that, there is a 10% allocation, and which breaks down to $51,796. And the methodology that was made up, this was changed, and it was correct, as stated, that it was first came up in 2022, or 2002, is that what you stated, Kathy?
2011.
2011. It was revamped in 2019 to this mythology of how the breakdown was.
Methodology.
Mythology, yeah, methodology.
Totally different.
Yeah, you go,
connotation.
absolutely. It sure is.
Maybe not.
So in that breakdown, it was decided that it would be 45% of that full 51,000 would be allocated to sewer, and 55% would be to water. Then it came, we brought on the stormwater, and that was allocated at 3.3% of that line item. So in there, like I said, that's all expenses, salaries for each one of these departments that you see listed there.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Do all the percentages on the water sewer going from top to bottom and all of the percentages on the stormwater percentage column, do those all add up to 100%?
Sorry, I don't,
So you have the indirect percentages.
yep.
I assume that if you add these up and these up, you'll come to 100% of the indirect costs.
You have to add the bottom line in expenses and that for DPW health insurances, pension, and workers' compensation. Those are for DPW's workers that actually are assigned to the DPW.
Okay.
So when you add both of those up, that comes to that 728,503.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Cron?
So in other words, DPW uses the services of other town boards and organizations, and you pay for that back based on these percentages of the total expense of that town board or organization.
And expenses, correct.
Thank you.
That's what this states.
Mhm.
And well, we'll leave the question to indirect cost. I mean, there are rules and regulations that state how that can be, adhered to with tracking of times and so on.
Mr. Chair, if I might?
Sure.
Mr. McKay, as the DPW Director, based on the percentages breakdown of the DPW staff for water, sewer, stormwater, and general fund percentages, your percentage breakdown that neither the town administrator nor the select board disputes, what is your educated guess as to a refund due to the sewer, water, and stormwater enterprise payers because of general non-enterprise related work performed by enterprise assigned staff?
Okay, so when we first did this whole study, and we actually started the study in 2017, and the study was done, and we started tracking what work was done from water and sewer and stormwater work, whether stormwater wasn't in there in 2017. And we came up with, to correct into the general fund work was approximately, an educated guess was, back then, was $150,000 to $200,000.
Okay, thank you. Based on undisputed percentage figures, your educated guess is 150 to 200,000 that the enterprise, the three enterprise funds would be due from the general fund.
That would be.
Reimbursement. Now, how much, if any, has the select board, perhaps it could be a town administrator answer, Mr. Chair? or
Well, he doesn't speak for them, so
Okay.
let me
How
direct the
much,
question.
if any, has the select board corrected and returned for FY '24?
So, in 2019, let's go back through the whole process of what's been allocated. In 2019, there was a DPW worker that was hired full-time and under the general fund auspice, with everything going towards the general fund. There was a correction of a miscalculation of assigned work. There was a person that worked in the transfer station full-time, 40 hours a week, and his time was split 60% into water and 40% into the transfer station. So that was corrected back in 2019.
It was in '21.
21, FY '21.
And then, Mr. Chair, could I ask what was done in FY '22?
In FY '22, there was, other than keeping the indirect costs at 2.5%, nothing.
Nothing. In FY '23, what was done to reimburse the ratepayers?
Nothing.
Okay. And what is being done for this current budget, FY '24?
FY '24, we're looking at reallocating managerial staff in the amount of $47,767.
So your educated guess was between 150 and 200,000, and after 2011, this has been going on, so for 2024 FY, 47 of that educated 150 to 200,000 is being reimbursed.
Correct.
Okay. So we're short on that. Anything else you'd like to add, or anybody else, before I move on to?
Well, I think that this was, could be more being done with this? Absolutely. Should we be doing more about it? Talking about it tonight is the first step. It's the first time it's been talked about all year. There's a lot involved in this. I mean, there's rates that this board, every board talks about upcoming things that are, coming towards the ratepayers of Millis. I mean, these are the same ratepayers that are our taxpayers. We're the same people. We're paying the same thing. And to see an allocation of $728,503, I think you know that since you were on the board, I never felt that that was a fair number. I still don't think that's a fair number. I
Okay.
never thought, let me finish. You asked a question.
Mhm.
Yeah, let me finish then. This number, if you look at surrounding towns, Medfield, they don't pay anything in indirect costs. You take a town like Medway, they pay $728,000. In Medway, supposedly much bigger than Millis, and so isn't Medfield. So anything that came from the study that was done, and as you stated at the very beginning, the only way you're going to correct this problem is hire staff. You need to hire staff to do the general fund work. Kathy, look at me, please, if you don't want to.
No,
Okay,
no.
then I'm done. Thank
No,
you.
I'm sorry, my
That's
eye,
right.
when I'm
Go ahead.
tired, Jim, my
Okay.
lazy eye goes
Then
over.
I'm
I
done.
really
So Mike,
apologize.
go ahead, if you have anything to add.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I don't want to interrupt.
No,
Ms.
I'm sorry,
McGinnis
really,
if
I have a
she's,
lazy eye, and
um,
it's been a bad couple of busy
So,
days.
I do agree with the Director of Public Works that I think the best way to resolve this problem would be the addition of several laborers in the DPW funded through the general fund. That has been a priority of the Select Board. Obviously, it's not before you for consideration tonight for reasons I think you're all aware of. It was on the list of items to be considered. The report that was mentioned did recommend several additional, up to 2 to 4 additional staff. We've only added 1, so I do think we need additional staff. And I think our staff does a great job with the DPW. They are spread thin, and we do need additional staff. I would just add a couple things, and I appreciate all the different opinions on the indirect costs. I think, you know, you ask 10 different people, you get 10 different opinions on whether it's appropriate or not. I will say that the consultant we hired to assist us with the report felt comfortable with these percentages. He has worked in a number of communities, but again, I respect different perspectives on that. And one other note I would like to say is we have, as the director mentioned, we have limited the past several years an increase in indirect allocation of 2.5%. Had we not done that, then the different enterprises would be paying an additional $99,000 in indirect costs to the general fund. So that's something that we've been trying to do to lighten the burden on the enterprise and users. So again, I think we have made some progress. Is there some more to go? I do agree. And my recommendation is to look to the best of our ability to add additional staff to the DPW, you know, as soon as we can afford to do so. It was listed as a priority. Really, the Council on Aging operation and the DPW were listed as some of the two highest priorities on the municipal side of the ledger. And it is unfortunate that we can't move forward with an additional laborer this year. But that's really all I have in regards to that. I don't know if the finance director, if I missed anything? No, okay. So that's all I have, unless there's other questions, Mr. Chairman.
If you would characterize the town budget is going to grow by 6% this year, as is the schools. And typically, that's a 4% calculation. There's 6%, an extra 2% that was added. Can you characterize, perhaps you or Ms. Johnson, where the extra 2% is going this year?
Sure. So, and again, 47,000 of that went to right-size, trying to move towards right-sizing the enterprise fund allocation. Another 15,000 went for the Council on Aging staff. The remainder is really because we're trying to catch up with several contracts. We have 2 years of increases rolled into this budget. As you know, several of our contracts had expired last June 30th. And those contracts were really, all those increases are hitting us come July 1st.
What type of contracts?
That would be our SEIU, or our basically
So
administrative staff.
our labor contracts?
Yes, collective bargaining agreements. That on top of, unlike the schools, we are expense heavy in some departments, and the costs of certain items have gone up dramatically. And again, we're not talking about, you know, huge amounts of adjustments in the budgets, but that strain has been felt by the departments. And again, the total 2% equals about 180,000. So, I mean, it seems like a large sum, but it doesn't stretch too far when we're trying to make the budgets fit.
I don't have the Paradigm report in front of me. I do recall that the town, the select board opted, they had options that were presented by the Paradigm report, and they opted to essentially make the recommended correction or the recommended adjustment in the methodology that's been described over, say, 5 to 7 years. And they were on track to doing that. Am I characterizing that accurately?
The board had actually hoped to do it within 3 years, once they, and hope to do it as soon as possible. I think the budget issues that have come up this year has put a little more constraint on that. And they'll be looking to make some additional moves in that direction next year. And again, I agree with the director, and I think the best way to do that would be added staff to the department, that are general fund expended.
Excuse me for 1 minute. Deirdre, would you mind muting Mr. Duffy? Politely?
Politely.
Yep.
I don't have any anxiety about money.
There you go.
Thank you. Where are we, either in a dollar figure or percentage-wise, to making the corrections to the corrections or adjustments
Well,
that
it's
were
hard-
recommended?
It's hard to give an exact figure, mainly because these figures are based on the different cost centers that the employees work in, and that shifts from year to year. We were told or advised by Community Paradigm we should use a 3-year average of those to kind of find out what the appropriate approximate balancing of those cost centers should be. And like I said, I think we made progress to there. I couldn't give you an exact number this evening. It's something we can certainly go back and take a look at based on the numbers as they stand. But like I said, we feel that the best way to meet that is through additional staff for the department. So that's where we're going to focus, I think, our energies going forward,
Okay.
and trying to find those funds to allocate.
Okay. Ms. McGinnis?
Yes, thank you. I wish to advise everybody that there are approximately 2,959 water and sewer ratepayers, and there are 3,332 ratepayers. And the fact that you would increase the staff, Mr. Chair, has nothing to do with the disproportionate breakdown of the funds. Regardless of how many people are hired, it's my opinion that it's still going to be, the breakdowns will be the same. And to go that this 3-year average, Mr. Chair, I believe our own administrative assistant since 2017 or 2018, along with the superintendent and Mr. McKay, have been calculating the breakdown on the charges, and there's been little or no difference in the years, 1 or 2%. Nothing that's saying, let's wait for 3 years. Again, this formula has been in 2011. It appears to me that, and God bless wherever you're putting the money that should go here, but my opinion as a Finance Committee member is that this should be taken care of before any additional staff to the senior center. This problem exists. It's gone from being 3 years to take care of to 5 to 7 to 8. And in order to ask the ratepayers to fund anything else, let's remind the sewer ratepayers, Mr. Chair, that they've been assessed an additional sum of $66,530 effective July 1st, 2023, from the Charles River Pollution Control District. A new assessment occurs each spring. So this assessment was 12%, and who knows what next year will be. Additionally, Mr. Chair, for water ratepayers, an additional charge will occur in FY24 for the water ratepayers in order to bond the $150,000 interest-only sum of the loan due for the newly constructed but not yet completed DeAngelis water treatment. So for the Board of Selectmen to say that bonds will not be due for 3, 4, 5 years, I challenge that statement. Let's not forget that the $3 million well is going to have to be paid someday, and they, according to the department, 2 to 3 years will be when water ratepayers will be responsible only for $3 million on your bill. Also, water ratepayers are responsible for the study and design of a new PFAS treatment plant in Well 3. Even though these charges are being paid by the water ratepayers, the whole town is benefiting because it's known around the whole area that Millis has good water, that this board, the select board, the town chose 3 years ago to start working on PFAS. And we're even doing another well now. And that's an enhancement. Check with any realtor. Millis has good water. Millis can sell water. Let's make the ratepayers pay what they are only responsible for, and not to be, since 2011, carrying the burden of town government on their shoulders. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Okay. Mr. Crum, go ahead.
Have the three enterprises, water, sewer, and stormwater, have they reached sufficient size that they can become an independent organization without having to rely on town services from DPW, Treasurer's Office, and so forth? And is there any savings in doing it that way, Or are we better off in the way that we have it with the indirect costs?
That, it would have to stay in the indirect costs, because we've looked at, when you look at this chart here, you've got to look at this chart, and when you look at the accounting office, not the accountant, the treasurer collector's office of $306,000, if you look the way that they're listed, there are two people in that office that are mainly paid out of water and sewer funds. They do the billing, they assist, and then they also assist with doing everything else. For us to run the entire operations, we're not big enough for that yet. When you only have, we'll never get that big. When you only have 2,900 customers out of, I think that, the taxes, the bills go out, there's only 3,300 homes in Millis. So to hire staff to pay for all their health benefits, their insurance, to collect the bills and process it, I don't think that it would be best that we break away from it. So I think this has to stay this way.
Mr. McKay, I think I heard you say that, or maybe it was Mr. McGinnis that said it, that your recommendation at the time, or your estimate at the time, was that the indirect expense was in the neighborhood of $200,000, $250,000. I'm in.
200.
I think I'm close.
150 to 200.
And I'm looking at this table, and I see that 12.3% of the pension funds are allocated or estimated, are in the methodology, and that alone is over $400,000. How do you estimate that the cost should be $200,000 when just that one line, the largest line here, is over 400? Are you saying that the pension portion of indirect fees should not come out of indirect, shouldn't be paid for by the enterprises at all?
Depending on if the worker works for the water and sewer stormwater, it should be paid out of the indirect costs. If he's assigned to whatever his percentage is, working under the general fund, then that should come out of the general fund.
So are we not tracking it that way? If we're tracking direct hours, are we
don't-
not?
We don't track, it's a percentage. It's a percentage of DPW staff that's broken down for all DPW staff.
I'll take a few more comments on this. Frankly, I would say that it's unfortunate that we're having this discussion now. I don't think it's germane to discussion and voting of the budget. And the reason is because of timing. We're not going to make these changes here, and we're not going to not vote the budget. If the point of the discussion is that the recommendation is that $15,000 that the Select Board has proposed to go to Council on Aging should go to the enterprise funds, that's a discussion we can have. But a wholesale change to how we administer and execute the enterprise or the utilities, that's a discussion that needs to be had going forward, starting now or after a vote, or July 1st, after town meeting and the budget's adopted, in front of the Enterprise Advisory Committee. And I think that's where these arguments and these points, which some are valid, I agree with some of them, but having this discussion here right before town meeting on this vote, when we've had weeks to have some of these discussions, because you've come before us before. You presented the budget, the enterprise budget.
I came in front of you and I told you I would come back to when I finally got the closeout of the budgets, to finalize the budgets. These are three of the largest budgets that you look at. Okay, it's almost $5 to $6 million, what, $4 million. And I'd just like to make one point on the $15,000. If you look at the general fund, that $15,000 that went to the Council of Aging came out of directly
overtime
came out of the DPW overtime budget, so let's not lose fact of that. So it was a conscious decision that someone made to take that money. And if you look at the recommendations from the town administrator and the finance director, their first recommendation was $50,000. And luckily, the select board looked at it and whittled it down to $14,000. My concern is the DPW general fund budget, when you're talking about, if you look at the line items, the expense line items, it hasn't changed since 2019. It's actually was decreased in 2019 to between $50,000 and $60,000. And, you know, price of asphalt has gone up $6, $7 a ton. Gravel goes up, and it's the only budget that had expenses that didn't go up 1 cent. It's identical to what it was in FY '23. So not to have a discussion about the three largest budgets on this side of the table, when do we talk about it? We're here to discuss the enterprise. Kathy took the win because she sent and requested most of this information from myself and the treasurer collector. That's how she has it, and we responded to it. I mean, I was going to tell you that, that it is correct. You know, if we're going to close out, I'll be quick, so we can move on.
You don't need to close out.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that we're not going to make changes to this methodology tonight. It's not in our authority.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Chair, not to interrupt, but the report that you do not have that Deirdre did pass out a few weeks ago, specific recommendations, the finding, the role of the Finance Committee in rates and enterprise analysis is limited. The recommendation, which it appears like the Select Board is picking and choosing their recommendations, the Finance Committee should have a role in reviewing and assessing a rate methodology. Now, to say that we just got this information at what time today? We just got the breakdowns on this. So is the fact that the Select Board can delay prevents the reviewing board from reviewing because we got it late? That's my question.
And Mr. Berube, if you know, I mean, you know from the emails yesterday, I just found out that the Select Board approved this Monday night. I wasn't advised, wasn't invited to come and discuss anything. It was just told to me that they approved it all Monday night. So it was a little concerning that this discussion is not being had, like you say, with the people that should have it. And, you know, we've heard a person, a Select Board member, stand at this microphone and state that $65,000. Well, it's not $65,000, it's $47,000 plus. So I don't know where he got that number. He came, you know, he stated it at your meetings, he stated it at every other meeting.
Who's he?
You can, Mr. Schultz,
The Vice Chair.
the Vice Chair, stated that there was $65,000. Well, it was incorrect. So I'm here to tell you that it's $47,000 plus dollars. I get it. We are appointing a committee tomorrow night. I don't know what powers they're going to have. They're only an advisory. Again, like most people, committees that are appointed in that capacity, if you look at surrounding towns, how they do it, they have full authorization to set everything. And the Select Board appoint them, but they do set all their, the rates, hearings, and everything else. So again, I don't know where you want to go with this. You know, it got off a little track that I didn't think we were going to get to. I thought I was going to do a budget presentation.
You may do a budget
with
presentation.
the-
I've barely interrupted you,
Yeah, I
other
know.
than to find
I-
out, other than to make sure I understand what you're talking about.
So the sewer, just quickly, I'll do sewer, and then we can go to water. The sewer increase at the Charles River, as Kathy stated, it's $66,590, which is a 12% increase. That will affect rates. That will affect rates this coming July when we set them.
By how much?
I don't know that yet. You know, depending on what else, we have to look at the budget and see what
up to
the
the
increases, it all has to be done. So we'll, you know, that'll happen before July 1st. We set the
Mr.
rate.
Chair,
Go ahead.
I think it would be helpful to, you know, I'm not a ratepayer. I just have to install an expensive water treatment system in my own house. But it would be helpful to see the trend of the rates for ratepayers,
Okay.
even over the past 10 years, because I don't recall having seen that. Maybe it was presented, we get presented with a lot of numbers.
It was actually just decided on, if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm
The
wrong.
Charles
by
River
the
came
Charles
at the
River.
lake, correct.
And it, I mean, the rates went up. Costs on contracts go up all the time, and we don't we more or less take them on face value. If somebody has a problem with that and thinks that we should review contracts, every contract that the town has, and get into decades of budget data to see, and to argue rates, Charles River sets the rates, and the select board attends their meetings. They have the authority to set the rates. There's nothing we're going to do about a sewer rate.
Yep. It must be this number of going over 10% this year with everything, because it's usually an average of 3 to 4% over the past 4 to 5 years.
Over the last 4 or 5 years.
You know,
It's
there was a big-
unfortunate. I don't disagree with
To
you.
the ratepayers.
To the ratepayers.
Ratepayers.
It goes just to the sewer ratepayers,
Okay.
correct. But I think that if we don't talk about it here, and the ratepayer just sees their bill, you know, hopefully people watch this, if they just get their bill, and they just, what happened? Why wasn't this discussed?
So that is a
Or-
responsibility of the sewer commission, sewer commissioners, who are the select board, yourself. You do a fantastic job of advertising the things that are going on with the utilities. I see your flyers in the mail, as I suspect everybody else does. There's plenty of opportunity for those that have the insight on this to make people aware. And I will make a point to make sure that I describe it in the Finance Committee report that will go out next week.
Correct. And then the other, last was the water, was the, as Kathy stated, was the increase from the, what the treasurer collector stated to her today and myself, that the increase, right now in FY '23, there's an increase of $60,000. In the upcoming year, she will, that increase will go from $60,000 to $160,000. And that will be a rate increase. That will affect rates when it gets to that 160.
Can we go over, can everybody pull up the sewer enterprise fund spreadsheet that we have? And I'll give us an opportunity to go through the, you know, basically the last 3 columns, the '23 budget, the '24 request, and the '24 proposed. And if you have a question on that, now's the time to ask Mr. McKay.
Thank you.
So I see FY '24 requested, 306,574, FY '24 proposed, 306,574, no discrepancies, and includes budget increase. Going down the expenses, there are no deltas until you get to,
Clothing.
there are no deltas.
Yeah.
You got 1.3 million, 1.33 million and change requested, 1.33 million proposed. So the select board is proposing as requested, is how I understand that.
Correct.
Any questions on the sewer budget? The water budget. 362,000 and change requested, 362,000 proposed, and for inclusion in this, in FY '24 budget. And the same thing at the bottom line. Any clarifications that you'd like to make, or anything you'd like to add?
As I stated in my previous budget, that there was a definitely decline, as you can see, in the interest and principal costs this year, much lower, and that will hopefully offset some of the 15% increase that we had last year in water.
What line, do you see that? Is that LTD, STD?
Yep. Long and short-term
Yep.
debt, yep.
Yep, okay. Okay, do you want to do stormwater? Ready to?
Sure.
Okay.
So briefly on the stormwater, I'd just like to give a note. I mean, last year, the past 5 years, we were in a permit stage. Now we're getting ready to actually start enforcing the permit. Basic answer is that now we go, and we went out before with clean a catch basin. Now we have to take each individual 1,700 catch basin, give it a name, give it a number, and we start measuring it before the catch basin's cleaned, after the catch basin's cleaned, and we have to keep track of every single one of them. We're out testing every outfall in the town of Millis. That's part of it. And now that we have to start upgrading whatever systems that we have are not up to date, that will start. There's a sizable amount of money that we've been saving in the fund, One project will take that and it'll go away. One storm sector.
Alexa, turn on torch lamp.
So, you see that, that's been the steady budget since it's been in place for the past 5 or 6 years. And the same, the select board approved the increases and went along with that.
Jim, there's a noteworthy, you may have already said this, but
Yep.
for clarification, on the stormwater, there's a noteworthy increase in requested and proposed on short-term debt interest of about $20,000.
Correct, that's the, our favorite project. There was money that
Spring-
was, that's the one on Village and Bird Street.
Okay,
There
yep.
was still design on that, and we're just carrying that money. We're not spending it, but the treasurer collector did, borrow those funds, and they may be turned back over.
So why, if that's the case, then why is the request $20,000 more? Because we're paying on it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Should we be?
Yes, because we'll use it. I mean, there's still something has to be done there. We're actually redesigning, because it's flowing off into the tree farm that we probably all buy our Christmas trees from. He's getting flooded out, so it's just altering the design of it.
Okay. Okay, any additional questions for Mr. McKay?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
And before you start, Mr. Duffy, do you have a question? You've seen your hand raised, I've seen it not raised,
If I could ask.
and he's muted.
Okay.
None heard. Go ahead, Ms. McGinnis, I'm sorry.
I'd like to revisit the snow and ice budget, Mr. Chair.
Am I unmuted? Sorry.
The Select Board has determined, quote, philosophically, to use the town administrator's term, to continue to charge water, sewer, and stormwater ratepayers for the snow and ice removal. This has been a multi-year and long-debated issue. In the current Select Board budget, has a correction been made? In the current Select Board budget, I'd like to ask, has a adjustment been made to offset the charges, once again, charges that are imposed to the ratepayers, but it does not pay for ratepayers' items that they need?
No,
Is this for the issue of stipends?
There's no stipends.
No.
Stipends, licenses, does this center around that particular
yes,
issue?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
No. There's been no change in that. They're still charging
All right,
the.
so it's been hotly debated, I've heard the debates. I don't intend to rehash the debates here, it's not what we're here for tonight.
I thought we were here to just to discuss the enterprise costs. And this
Can
is an
discuss.
enterprise cost.
Okay, we just discussed it, we heard you.
Okay.
If anybody else wants to speak up on it, they may. Mr. Duffy?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I tried to text Deirdre, but I couldn't. The audio's terrible from remote. There's probably nothing anyone can do about it, but I just wanted to let you know. Hard to hear.
Mr. Duffy, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. The difference is, when you speak right up into a mic, people at home can hear you. When you don't, they can't.
The audio from home, listening, is very garbled, cuts in and out. That's all I wanted to, I tried to ping Deirdre to say, probably nobody can fix it at this point, but
Scott,
just
would
trying
you
to let
mind asking Nick, just to see if he can improve that? Okay, thank you, Mr. Duffy. We're going to see what we can do, no promises.
Does he have any comments? other than-
It sounds good to me. I don't know.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's too bad.
Okay,
I'll deal.
The one time you have nothing to ask and everyone can hear you.
any other questions, comments? We can have discussion on this. I'm not shutting it off.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I didn't want to interrupt.
Go ahead.
The
Thank you.
director's presentation, but just a couple notes on the discussion. I know it was mentioned that some members of the select board had mentioned the $60,000 to $65,000 number, and that was our original estimate, but once everything settled out, it did come down to $47,000, so that is the number within the direct costs that we've worked to shift over for this coming year. Also, I just want to make note that, again, on the indirect cost allocations, the cap that we've established at 2.5% is now causing less cost to be billed to the ratepayers in the amount of $99,000. So that's an increase of $65,000 from last year. So those two together are about $112,000 in savings because of changes that were made to how we're calculating the billing to the enterprise fund users.
Mr. Kaczynski, if that table or that data is not readily available
I believe
on,
that is posted, right?
on a very simple table spreadsheet,
Yes.
I would ask that you provide it to us so that we can post it.
I believe it was provided. Indirect,
You
enterprise
have it.
indirect?
No, you didn't post.
It's on the website.
Again,
under your-
I just want it, I don't want, I'm not saying I don't appreciate this. This is good data.
No, it's
But
in-
what
it's
you
in what
just
I gave you.
described ought to be readily available for us so that we can post it.
Yeah.
Well, if it's that clear, then why are we arguing, well, not arguing about it, but why is there contentious discussion about it? Is there a disagreement over,
Well, I think there's a feeling among some that it should be a lot more than
Okay,
that.
well-
And I wanted to bring that next point up to say that it was mentioned that there has been established an enterprise advisory committee. I think they're meeting very soon.
Tomorrow night.
And one of the things they've been asked to look at by the select board is the question that you've been discussing this evening. So they want that group to take a fresh look at that, with all the historical materials, look at that, gather that, have review and discussion on that, and come back to the board with some thoughts in regards to that once they've completed their initial reviews.
okay?
So that has been asked of that committee, and I'm sure that'll be a priority of the committee going forward. And I do want to also note that the select board certainly is cognizant of the increasing strains on the water users, especially with the PFAS requirements that are being put in place by the EPA and the DEP. That's been of great concern. And the select board did devote the full $2.4 million in ARPA funds to the construction, towards the construction of that plant. And those are funds that could have been used for general fund uses, and they chose to allocate all those to the water because they know how important that is, and they know how much of a strain that'll be to the water users. And on top of that, Mr. McKay has done a great job in advocating and getting additional funds for those plants through Congressman Auchincloss's office. So I just want to touch upon, it's not all doom and gloom. We are trying to make forward movement on this. And I would ask to give the Enterprise Advisory Committee a little time to come back and give a presentation, and we can certainly further that discussion at that time.
Okay, Mr. McKay,
So
looks
just
like you have.
quickly, so we debate this every day. So we have long discussions all day about this. In my estimation, when I said an educated guess of 150 to 200,000, that had nothing to do with the indirect costs. This was the transfer of staff and people doing general fund work. It had not, the indirect costs were never, they were two separate animals,
Thank you for clarifying
completely
that.
different.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you, sir. Okay, so we were getting ready to have a motion on Article 3, the operating budget.
Mr. Chair? Oh,
Yes, yep, we can. Move on. Ms. McGinnis?
I just, someone brought up at a previous, I think a select board meeting about cleargov.com, and I noticed it's on the finance committee's lines, and it appears nothing's been done for a few years. Is this safe to, does anyone feel comfortable about eliminating this until a future time?
Does anybody want
Excuse me,
to
Mr.
speak to
Chair.
that?
Thank you.
Carol Johnston, Finance Director.
Ms. Johnson?
The ClearGov for the municipal side is updated through February of 2023. If anybody would like to go on to ClearGov, they can see all the information that's available to them for the municipal side. I believe Ms. McGinnis is speaking about the school department. That has not been updated, I think, since 2019.
Okay.
But it is not on the municipal side.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Any other comments on?
I'd just
On
like
that?
to make notion also that I believe the DPW budget was clearly...
Hold on 1 second. Any more comments on ClearGov?
Oh, I retract my request, Mr. Chair, now that
Sorry.
we're able.
Okay. The floor is yours, Kathy. You can come back, we can come back to you if you're not.
No, I just, I'm just shoveling it against the wind here. It was stated at a meeting that it's clear that the DPW overtime budget was dropped by $15,000.
Yep.
And I believe there was statements made that the fire and police also cut their budgets. And that's why several of us asked for the line items to check. And it appears through the chair that the fire is level funded for FY '23.
Right, the requests for FY '24 were reduced.
Reduced, were denied.
Some of those requests.
So it wasn't cut, it was an
Right,
increase
you gotta
was
be- You gotta be
denied.
careful with the vernacular on that.
Right.
So when I say there were cuts
Cuts.
to the FY '24 budget, there were cuts to the request.
The request,
That's
okay,
correct.
thank you. And I believe the police was also level funded.
Well, I'd have to take a look again, but I
Yeah.
know they were.
When I
they did
totaled
not-
everything,
Right, they did not get all the additional increases that they were looking for.
requested increases,
That's
but they're,
correct.
and again, the DPW was not level funded. It was, their level funding was decreased by
I
15,000.
think their overall expenses were level funded.
I'm just talking about the overtime. Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. That's all I have to say for tonight on this matter.
Chiefs of Fire, would you mind making your way up to the mic? And the reason that I invite you up is because we had a question last week on vehicles, as to, and I'm a little, knowledgeable on this as well. The request was for 2 cruisers, I believe, and I think the capital budget includes renewal of at least 1 lease. Can you speak to that issue?
Absolutely. 2 seconds, just to give you a little background. 2016, we were, the fleet was a mess, because there was no maintenance to it, and the town and the boards replaced 4 cruisers at one meeting. And by doing so, that got us enough cars to operate as a police department. That being said, we worked hard to implement a replacement schedule so that we wouldn't have to put the town in a position where I had to come ask for 4 cruisers, because I know what the answer is going to be. Like, if I'm asking for 2 and I get maybe 1, but if I was to ask for 4, I know what the answer is. That being said, we take great care in the cruisers, and it just makes it more financially attainable for the town to absorb that replacement schedule. In addition, they do have a shelf life, and we max out the shelf life. And you can verify that by contacting departments around us. We get 7 years out of a car, and then they just start falling apart. I think they're made to go only so long. That being said, once we get past that 7 years, the records will show that we run between $6,000–7,000 in repairs for a cruiser. So we want to keep our cruisers up to date and reduce the cost for maintenance. We do have warranties that we capitalize on through the lease program, and then even like some of the drivetrain stuff will go 7 years on them. So we've made out pretty well. I would just hate to see us fall behind the 8 ball in terms of that cruiser replacement. It took us 6 years to get on the schedule, so I'm just curious, if we don't get the car, like, what is the plan moving forward to get us back onto that schedule so we're not back where we were 6 years ago? That's,
Well, you have been lauded in the past for having the best vehicle plan amongst the town departments, at least presented the best, and I think the town understands the criticality of that resource for you. My answer to your question is it's gonna take, very deliberate and smart advocacy that you have done over the past years, and you're gonna have to continue to do it, because there's no guarantees that just because you requested 2 this year, and you're gonna, if it gets voted and approved, that you'll get 1, that next year you'll make that up. It's gonna take, and that's just the reality of the budget situation. I just want to confirm, and whether it's Mike or Carol, and clarify that the FY '24 proposed budget included expenses for the police department for $329,000+. I believe that included 2 cars, because this is through a lease, and the variance between the request and the approved is less 36,000, and I believe that's because that's 1 cruiser, and it's the lease for 1 year. So next year, that would be a different number, depending on how many you request and how many are approved. Is that accurate?
Yes, the police budget now just contains the funding for 1 additional cruiser.
Okay, and I also want to clarify, I don't necessarily think that the best way to present because we have a spreadsheet here that I believe is in our meeting materials. It's on top, it says Town of Millis Springtown Meeting Warrant Article List. It lists all of the articles with the funding sources. I just want to be clear that Article 13 and Article 14, there is an amount listed, but actually that amount is what I just referred to. It's in the operating budget. So the specific to the police cruisers, I think there's a 66 or 68, I scribbled through it.
66,911.
That actually is 0. It's 0 because this article is really only requesting authorization for a lease. The funding is contained within the operating budget in Article 3.
That's correct. That's correct.
Does everybody understand that?
It's just the authorization for them to enter
Right.
into a lease. The
Right.
lease is for a 3-year period for the cruisers
Yep.
and a 5-year period for the school buses.
Yep, okay. So just for clarity, there's no funding being appropriated under Article 13 and 14, thus those should be blank. The funding is appropriated in the respective budget, like in Article 3, so, okay? Does anybody have any questions or comments for Chief Sapphire while he's up here? Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, jumped the gun. Mr. Stedman?
What is the downside, other than having to make it up in the future, of getting 1 cruiser instead of 2? Will it impede your ability to perform your duties?
No, we can get by, without a doubt. I'm saying if we didn't get any, then that plan is out the window for all intents and purposes, unless next year miraculously, in a perfect world, I asked for 2 plus, I asked for 2 last year, could I please have 4 cars? Then my concern is how do we keep this schedule on track? And I appreciate the fact that obviously, in a perfect world, yeah, would it be great? I totally understand that, but we can manage that, and I'll have to pick which one we can get by with and what one needs to go.
Thank you.
Okay. All right,
Mr. Chair, I have one question.
Ms. Reyes?
The last time that you had gotten into the new leases for the 2 cruisers, there was a lead time of like 6 to 9 months. Has that changed?
No. Great question. It depends. Because we'll get a random email from the municipal CMG for police cars and say, we have a lot of 100. And then now you're competing with every municipality in the state. So between 4 and 8 months would be a fair estimate, but I would just like to say one thing. I know we're running late, but thank you for, I think that was great, adding the cruiser replacement into the budget. because it allowed us to get ahead of problems and not have to wait to the town meeting to replace a vehicle if we had an issue. And it worked out this past year, so thank you.
It wasn't all doom and gloom.
Scott?
Thank you, Scott Fusey, 411 Union. I just want to thank the chief. I remember when he first became chief, starting this leasing thing was good and not to fall behind. And he's done a tremendous job of getting grants for everything else within the cruises. So I appreciate his effort of getting his knowledge of it. So thank you.
Mr. Conroy, if you would. We have the same question about the school buses. There are a number of school buses requested included in the budget request. We discussed it last week as part of Article 14, but ultimately it really is the inclusion of bus lease costs in Article 3 in the operating budget. And essentially was it computers? I'm sorry.
It's right here. The leases for school buses.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
It's a lot of money for computers.
So, I sent you the question, but for the audience, the question is, could the school limp along and extend the life of the buses that are theoretically due for replacement? Could you request less bus renewals and defer purchase or lease of a new bus so that the gap for sped funding and other things could be the recipient of those funds?
So the short answer is no. And the reason is actually, the bigger reason is, as Mr. Wiggin presented to us at our meeting last night, the reality is the amount that was put, it was the amount he had calculated and was based off an estimate at the time, put $122,000 into the budget line, which a year ago or a year plus was was a slightly high estimate based on the existing lease. The reality is he's gone out to bid on leases, and for the $122,000, we're going to be able to lease 4 buses instead of 6 because of the increased costs. Now, there's a possibility with the existing company that we may be able to negotiate and get a 5th bus or possibly all 6, but in reality, it's probably 4 or 5. We have a dollar buyout on 2 of the 6 that we were leasing. So that's historically what we had done, is we would lease 6 buses with a dollar buyout on 2 of the buses. So in essence, we return 4 of them. We keep 2, and then what we do is we then basically move those into and replace, right now, we have a 20-year-old bus that's running now, barely, that's gonna have to go next year. If we're only able to get 4 out of this lease, we're gonna buy the 2 that we can get. Currently, our fleet is 9 buses all in. If we can only get 4, we'll keep one that we originally would have planned to rotate out. So we rotate 2 out every time this turns over. We'll keep one of them we can't. So we'll end up actually going down to 8 in the fleet if he's not able to negotiate something to get us in the 6. So, and I brought this up last night because I've been a proponent of putting a lot of these, what used to be warrant articles, into the operating budget since I was sitting on that side of the table, because they really were recurring things. And, depending on how time flies, and we'll get through this lease, but it could be a bigger problem 5 years from now. The reality is, on these leases, when the costs go up, you can buy less with that money. So what a future committee is going to have to deal with, and quite frankly, what we're dealing with, if we could only get 4 with 122, our options are to cut somewhere else or live with the 4 buses. We're going to live with the 4 because we're in a decent enough spot. 5 years from now, that $122,000 probably needs to be 160 to 200,000. That's a 5-year problem, but that's kind of the downside of this lease. Now, the upside is, if we hadn't put it in the budget line, we'd be, the reality is, it would be a must-fund article at $210,000, and it would have just taken more free cash from what was available, which is historically the scenario that played out. So that's a really long-winded answer to say, no, we can't take it down from 6, because in reality, we're already probably going to be less than 6. So we can't go for a lease that's less than the 122 that we have in the budget right now.
Mr. Stedman?
So, if I heard you right, I think you're saying you have 9 buses and you're replacing 2/3 of them now. 6 out of 9.
We're returning 4. So 6 of our buses are on lease. So 6 of our 9 are on lease, and then we own 3.
But you want at least 6 new buses, is what this
4
article is saying.
Because 4 are going back, we have to return 4.
Okay?
So it would be a net, it would really be a net reduction. We'd still end up with 6, because we have 2 of the 3 buses that we own should be put on out to pasture. One of them will be.
So you're returning 4 buses
Returning
and
4.
retiring 2 additional ones.
Correct. And
So
buying 2
Right.
that are on lease for $1 this year.
To maintain the 9.
Correct.
So your program, unlike Chief Sapphire's, is these all come in big waves at once as opposed to being spread out.
The leased ones do. We lease because, yeah, and this,
And
the alternative is, and even buying, so to buy 4 compared to what's on the lease, to buy 4 buses is $210,000 based on the memo presented.
How
to us.
long do you run your buses?
Well, we returned 4,
How long are the leases?
5 years.
5 years. So then every 5 years, we would be looking at this.
No, every year.
Every 5 years, we renew a lease. So every 5 years, we put 4
Can I
buses.
speak up?
Every 5 years, this lease gets renewed. So every 5 years, we take 4 of the buses and we just exchange them. And we take 2 buses and we buy for $1, and we rotate 2 of 3 that we own out.
I may have not heard you correctly. Is it mandatory that you lease a certain amount in order to get the
It's
rate?
mandatory that we provide transportation to
No,
students.
no, but I mean, when you're leasing, do you
So-
have, is there a
so-
is there a certain amount of money you have to spend in order to lease? Or can you do a rotating every 2 years, rolling it every 2 years so that can that be possibly done?
We can't restructure a lease. Now, in the upcoming lease that's going to be signed, whether it's 4 buses or 6 buses, we are going to build in an option to buy all of them for $1 at the end. So then we have a bigger fleet, so then we could potentially lease less buses
But
because
if
we'll
they're
have a
only
newer fleet.
lasting, if they're only lasting 5 years and you've got a 5-year
No,
lease.
we've got a bus that we've had for 20 years. We leased it for 5, then we bought it for $1 and we kept it for another 15.
I see, okay, all right.
So yeah. Okay.
You've explained it. Stop digging. I'm joking. Any more questions for Mr. Conroy?
I do, but it's
Go
mostly
ahead.
for you. There was a question, just for information for a lot of people. There was explained that there's a 3-year incentive to give to retired teachers and other staff that are planning a retirement. Are you familiar, remember, Mr. Berube?
I remember it was discussed
And you were
at the
gonna
select board
check-
meeting.
No, here you said you would be talking to the school committee and you were going to ask them. I'd like to know if that $5,000 a year for 3 years, is that a stipend or is it included in retirement benefits?
It's part of, so if you take an incentive in the last 3 years, it's built into, it's basically a longevity payment that does count towards their retirement.
Okay.
But if they do not retire after the 3rd year, the payment goes away.
Right. I just wonder, Mr. Chair, now's not the time for this, but at what point does it become that we're all one big team, one big family? Why aren't the benefits the same for the school and for municipal? That,
It's a
no
great
an- there's no
philosophical
answer?
question.
I know, enough, we don't do philosophical on boards. It's cut and dry, written.
Well,
I
there's
encourage the
separate
select
unions.
board to review their,
It's like regionalization, you know, you gotta get a lot of people to agree to, it's a long-term initiative, it would take time to get people to do. There are separate unions, unions would have to give up rights, unions would have to give up,
going forward, Mr. Chair.
correct, then that's what it would take, and it would take, it would probably never happen, but if it were to happen, it would take a lot of time.
And a good cue into regionalization, Mr. Chair,
We're
that
not
you
gonna
just brought
discuss
up.
that tonight.
You said
Okay,
that the dispatching.
we're not gonna discuss it tonight. We're not on regionalization.
You said
It has
that you would
nothing-
provide
It has
the
nothing to
answer.
do with this budget. If I did, I'll go to the tape, and I apologize, I'm not prepared to discuss regionalization tonight. It has absolutely zero to do with this budget and this warrant and this town meeting. Okay?
That
Thank you
makes
very
sense.
much.
Thank you.
All right, we good?
Yeah, for now. Thank you. Okay? I am prepared to go through the budget line by line. Actually, we'll do that after we have a motion, if anybody desires. So, would you please make the motion for the operating budget, Article 3? I know typically I will do that at town meeting, but I'm not going to do it tonight.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon?
I move that we recommend approval of of Article 3, which is the town budget, to transfer from available funds the sum of $41,855,721 for the fiscal year '24 budget, from primarily from taxation in the amount of $39,840,187, but also transfers from the ambulance fund of $816,356, from perpetual care interest and $332, from the sale of cemetery lots, $7,285, from cell tower revenue, $55,776, from bond premium release of $102,515, from marijuana impact fees, which are part of free cash, $271,314, and from free cash, $233,453, as well as the transfer from sewer fund, from the sewer fund for indirect costs to the general fund, $253,439, from the water fund to the general fund for indirect costs of $309,759, and from the stormwater fund to the general fund from indirect costs in the amount of $165,305.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we vote to recommend approval recommend approval of Article 3 as previously stated and as read. Discussion. So I'm prepared to go through the budget line by line if people want to. Can answer questions, we can dive into it. I think we've, over the course of the last 2 months, 3 months, we've hit just about all of these items at some level of detail, but we can go into more detail as desired.
Mr. Chair, I would
Mr. Crum.
recommend that unless somebody has specific questions about a specific line item, we just leave it to that.
Noted?
Agreed.
None heard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Yay.
Motion passes 8-1, Deirdre. Article 4. So just for everybody's awareness, Article 4 and 5 are, they've replaced the previous Article 4. Mostly because of our discussion last week where we requested some clarification and perhaps some clarification of intent and controls on what the free cash that is being used to bridge the gap in out-of-district costs and sped costs, put some controls and clarify intent on that. So you can see there's now Article 4 and 5, which used to be just Article 4. I'll take a motion. Mr. Crone, would you do me the
I move to approve Article 4, to move for the town to transfer from free cash the sum of if I get the right one, $538,697 for supplemental funding for the school department.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 4, transfer from free cash the sum of $538,697 for supplemental funding for the school department. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Stedman.
am I correct in assuming that of the $1,163,680.71 of free cash, everything that is committed has been subtracted, and this is the amount of free cash left that is not previously allocated or in another warrant? Am I correct in that assumption?
I'm
That is
getting
correct.
the north-south head nod from 3 of the authorities in the room, the finance director, the town administrator, and the vice chair of the committee.
Thank you.
No further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay.
Nay. Nay.
Motion passes 8-1, Deirdre. Article 5 is essentially similar to Article 4, except for we're dealing with stabilization fund transfer rather than free cash. Mr. Underhill.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Finance Committee recommend approval to the transfer from the stabilization fund, the sum of $400,000 for supplemental funding for the school department. Said supplemental funding being intended to support special education-related services for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 5, transfer from stabilization fund the sum of $400,000 for supplemental funding for the school department. Discussion. I'll just state that as a restate, because we've talked about it, that there is a stabilization fund policy, and when debits are made from the account, there's a period of 3 years that they must be paid back. And that is the intent of this committee, as well as the stated intent of the select board. We understand that, and we hope that the state will come through with aid over the course of the year so that that can be paid back promptly ahead of 3 years. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Garzon?
I have difficulty with this. I understand the math, I understand the intent, but I fear for where we're going to end up next year, and that we're going to end up having to make larger cuts because we didn't take those steps this year. I have no confidence that we're going to get any relief from the state. I have no confidence that our special ed costs aren't going to continue to rise. I have no confidence that other costs that hit the school department budget aren't going to continue to rise. And so I'm afraid that by not taking some distasteful and difficult decisions in this year, we're actually going to make things worse for next year. And so, and I also don't think that this this deficit for the school budget falls under our stabilization funding policy. We have a lot of challenges as a small town in Millis. It's very hard for us to support the schools that we have and the services that we have with the tax base that we have. And I I'm just afraid that by taking this step, we're going to make things even worse for us as taxpayers in the future years. So those are my thoughts on this article.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Crowe?
I know that when we had the school committee in here, and Ms. Garzon's point is well taken, that I know yourself, myself, and others put the school department on notice that this was not going to happen again next year. And it's incumbent upon them to find the money next year to fund their budget without going to stabilization, without going to free cash. This year, it came upon us seemingly suddenly. But we have given them notice. And I think that's all we can do, Ms. Garzon, this year. Unfortunately, I agree with you. It's not, if we decided to go against the select board's decision to authorize this money, we don't know what the consequences of that will be. At least we know where the consequences are right now. The school children will be taught. But next year, I agree, this cannot continue to happen. And I, for one, said that they should look at zero, from ground zero, and start looking at what they really need and what isn't necessary in a system that's 140 years old. So I agree with you, but I would say that I would vote for this from the basis that we're late in the process now, and I think this would put a real shock to the system if we didn't.
That's fair.
My comments are, I don't disagree with or agree with all of what each of you said. I agree with parts of it. And I foresee next year that there will be first off, this year there will be impacts. There will be, as we've been presented multiple times, there will be this budget as presented with the free cash infusion and the stabilization infusion. There will be cuts forced to be made, whether that comes from educators or administrators. There will be layoffs that are necessary in order to complete to fund the budget. So cuts are part of this proposal this year in this budget. I predict that next year the debate will become, I don't think that the school will be able to cut much further. They certainly won't be able to cut much further in their expenses. We know that they're 90% personnel, salary costs, and 10% expenses. So you're not going to get, depending on if there's an increase in special ed or increase in their budget requirements, you're not going to get that likely from the expense line. And they would have already cut 7 positions. So next year, I believe the discussion will be further cuts, which will be more equally or as painful, I predict, or an override, which would be tax increases, as you described, unless the state comes through, as has been requested by various persons in this room, various committees, boards, and citizens. And I think my recommendation would be that we approve the budget as presented, and we continue on and increase our efforts to advocate for ourselves to the state that they amend the model for special ed and circuit breaker calculation and funding, and that they correct the disparity that a small town like Millis is going to be forced to endure this year. And I think this is an adequate or an acceptable use of stabilization. Our stabilization policy, we've done I've looked at the withdrawals from stabilization. This isn't precedent setting. We've been responsible with our stabilization resources. We've added to them. We subtracted to them from the account and put the money back, and kept within 5% of our operating budget in adherence with our policy. I don't think that taking from stabilization will impact any bonding as currently considered. But that's not to say that this is easy and we should do it without deliberation as we're doing it right now. And looking at those figures and making sure that going forward that is essentially a must-pay for the years coming. So with that, Mr. Stedman.
I hate paying taxes, and more taxes than I need to. And I know the people at Glen Ellen feel the tax rates here are really high. Some have moved from adjacent towns, downsized, and find their tax bills the same or higher. Having said that, however, if we do not fully support our schools, we're sending our town on a death spiral that I don't believe it will ever recover from. This is not everything the school had wanted. I think it is a compromise that I support. I will say I have trouble with the message of laying off personnel at the schools and getting 6 shiny new school buses when many of ours appear newer than what I see driving around Dover and Sherborne. That's a little bit of a tangent, but that's my personal feeling, Mr. Chair.
I just want to maybe take a minute to go and delve a little further in what you just said. I won't be as dramatic on death spiral, but there are implications to not funding schools. Not funding schools has the potential to drive new growth and drive families away from Millis, which reduces the population that contributes to the budget that we're talking about. The new growth numbers could go down. And that's part of this equation where the select board has, they've considered what they think the new growth number should be. But if growth were to slow down in this town and revenue were to fall off, then again, that's the start of taxes go up, revenue goes down. That's a negative loop that is unsustainable. So I think and then going forward, every budget should be looked at for potentially for cuts.
And DPW can't continue to fund everything else. They seem to get the brunt of the cuts.
Yep. There's difficult choices, lots of compelling arguments and requirements for critical needs have been made to the Capital Planning Committee, to us, to the Select Board, whether they be above service level requests. I don't think I think we have an appreciation for those that we feel are important, and some of the most important ones will not get funded this year, and they may not get funded next year. So there are difficult choices to be made, and I don't think anybody's asking for much that is beyond reason. I don't see any unreasonable requests that we've had this year. There are difficult choices to be made. So whether the money is needed to fund a council on aging position, which we've heard for years that has been requested, whether it's for DPW staff, I understand their requests. It's up for very competent people and respected people in this room and that have been here before to keep advocating to the select board, to their neighbors, to us, so that hopefully we have a good understanding of their request, and especially to the select board who presents the budget. They present the budget to us. We can make recommendations to them, but it's their budget, and we're just making a recommendation to Town Hall. So, any further comments? Okay. Yeah, town meeting. What did I say? Town Hall.
Mr. McKay.
Mr. McKay,
We knew
please.
you were saying. Such a stick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. James McKay, 416 Village Street, and that's as I speak today as a resident of Millis on these articles. I'm in favor of both of these articles, and I'm not going to add anything of the discussion that you have all, I'll do that at town meeting. And first, I want to thank you for having the discussion. This is where it starts, having this type of discussion, and it's going to solve this problem. And it can't wait till next May. This has got to be solved starting tomorrow, because it's not going to go away. We've heard from every presenter that gets up here. If anything, it's going to get worse. And I believe that with this body here, and I encourage this body to stay involved in it with the select board and the school committee, that this situation, it's not the school problem. This is a town problem. You've heard Mr. Stedman state that if this happens, and that it's true. The town could go in a spiral down. So I do stand in favor of both of these articles.
Thank you, sir. Okay, any further comments? Mr. Duffy, I see your hand raised virtually.
No, it's not. Sorry.
Then
Thank you.
put it down.
Okay. All those in favor of approval, recommending approval of Article 5, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Deirdre, the motion passes 7-2.
7-2, okay.
I will take Article 4 and 5. 3, 4, 5, correct.
Aren't you already on that?
Moving to Article 7. And that is the Sewer Enterprise Fund.
Mr. Chair, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate, even after my bantering, from the sewer department receipts the following sums to operate the Sewer Enterprise Fund beginning July 1, 2023. Salaries and wages, $300,000, $306,574. Expenses, $1,331,252, for a total of $1,637,826. Simple majority.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 7 as previously stated. Discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion passes 9-0. Article 8.
My teacher. Article 8, Mr. Chair, I move to recommend approval to raise and appropriate from Water Department receipts the following sums to operate the Water Enterprise Fund beginning July 1, 2023. Salaries and wages, $362,396. Expenses, $1,647,340, for a total of $2,009,736.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 8, operation funds for, as previously stated, for the Water Enterprise Fund. Discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Motion passes 9-0. Article 9.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. McGinnis.
I move to recommend approval that the town vote to raise and appropriate from Stormwater Department receipts the following sums to operate the Stormwater Enterprise Fund beginning July 1, 2023. Salary and wages, $244,697. Expenses, $482,036, for a total of $726,733.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend approval of Article 9, for a total of $726,733, as previously read. Discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion passes 9-0. Article 13. Sarah?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Reyes?
I move that we approve the vote to borrow under the provisions of MGL Chapter 44, any other enabling authority, the sum of $614,605 for the lease/purchase of up to 6 buses for the Millis schools.
Could we hold off on the second for a minute? We ask this every year. We're authorizing a lease. Do we give a dollar figure?
Sometimes we do. And it just gives the scope to the public as to the cap of that amount.
Okay.
So we can borrow up to that amount. We
We'll
don't
just-
have to borrow the full amount.
Okay. We'll just have to be very
Shouldn't it
clear
say
in our
up to
discussion.
Shouldn't it say up to 614?
It's implied that you can always borrow less than that.
Okay.
Well, I would move that we make it clearer so that at town meeting, when people look at this, they would understand that maybe. I'm sure, I know you're right that it is, but perhaps not to exceed might be amended?
It's something that I have to check with bond counsel to see
Okay.
if we can do that.
Yep, I know bond counsel has to approve these.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mr. Conroy?
Mr. Chair, my only thought, if we're including the total value of the 5 years lease of $614,000, that we also state it's 5 years. It's not $600,000 a year. I think as it's
Right.
written in there,
That's what
it would beg significant questions of, it reads as if it were borrowing $600,000 for 6 buses.
For 6
So
buses.
Well,
But
the
it
problem-
is, but it's for,
Five years.
over the 5 years.
I think you're right. We probably shouldn't touch it, but it should be explained at town meeting.
The discussion comments absolutely will. We'll make sure that you have, guidance
Yeah.
that you need to make sure that, I have a problem with it mentioning any money. We've already appropriated the money. This has always been explained, yes, it is. It's been appropriated previously in Article 3. It's included in Article 3, just like the police cars.
That's the lease expenses.
It's the
That's what you
appropriation.
did approve
It's the appropriation.
before
This is only authority to enter into a
It's
lease.
the borrowing authorization, which
If
requires
you
a
don't
two-thirds
borrow, you
vote.
don't pay the lease payments.
Well, Mr. Chair, can I ask, was this drafted by bond counsel?
Yes.
I wouldn't touch it.
Yeah. The discussion is where it's gonna have to be clarified
Yeah.
for the layman. I'm the layman, I'm not an attorney, but this confuses the issue, because we've said all along that in our discussion in previous meetings, that the funding is in the operating budget, and this is just authority to enter into a lease. So, all that said, I'll take a second.
I have,
Second. Oh, sorry, go
Moved and
ahead.
seconded, discussion.
yeah, I have a question on, is it appropriate to authorize the funds before we've authorized the borrowing?
One has to come before, before the
Yeah.
other.
You don't
There's
get the
nothing
money.
inappropriate about it. If the
Okay.
funds, if this is not approved, then those funds, would probably get redistributed at a future town meeting, either at the fall town meeting, or they'd simply fall into free cash.
It wouldn't be funded.
But.
There wouldn't, but
there
then
wouldn't
the
be any
funds
fund-
There
wouldn't be
a need for
available
the
for,
first, there wouldn't be a need for part of that first year payment, that's correct.
that's why I'm
but
just
not the
asking the
full
question
amount.
whether the authorization for the borrowing should happen before the budget, which allocates the funds.
I understand your point, we have always put them after the
I know we
budget,
have,
but
it's
But it's
just-
a legitimate point, is the chicken and the egg, is
Right.
which is more appropriate to go
I
first.
mean, we're not Congress.
I would, my answer to that would be, if the town meeting appropriates the funds, then it would be expected they would approve this. This is a procedural step we have to do, and certainly if the town meeting chose not to give that authorization, it would have to be decided, at a future town meeting how those funds would be used. Certainly with the school budget, it gets a little more complicated, but we have agreed as part of the budgeting that funds for bus leases would be within the school's base budget. And I'm not aware of any problems from this approach in the past, but, there's always a complication that could come up.
I think it can be, I'm gonna curtail discussion. I think it needs to be clarified in the discussion comments. If bond counsel says that this is how it should be, and this is how we've done it in the past, and we've been successful, then there's no reason to change it, other than to make sure that we're very, very clear in discussing it, and prepared to answer questions on it. So, any more questions, any more discussion? None heard? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 8-1, Deirdre. Article 14.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Reyes.
I move that we approve the town to vote to borrow under the provisions of MGL Chapter 44 or any other enabling authority the sum of $66,911 for the lease/purchase of one police cruiser.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the committee vote to recommend Article 14, which is a borrowing for one police cruiser, as previously moved. Discussion.
Mr. Chair, I would make the same kind of explanation that this is a 3-year lease and that isn't the full amount that's coming out of this year's budget.
Yeah, and when we do the explanation, though, that comes up.
Good, thank God I don't have these articles.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Any nays? Sorry. Come on. Okay. Motion passes. Motion passes 9-0. I think that completes our discussion and voting of the warrant articles. Deirdre, can you show any that we missed? Mr. Kaczynski, I don't think we missed any.
I think you covered them all, as far as I
Okay.
can tell.
During the flurry of activity and excitement, I've misplaced my agenda, and I've just found it. Finance Committee report inputs. So I apologize to you, I could not
Thank
master.
you, Mr. Kaczynski, for your answers.
Could not master a printer, or actually I'm having printer difficulty. So I typically don't do this, I opted to do it this year because I felt that the Finance Committee inputs that essentially I'm responsible for need improvement. It's difficult to do these, it's always difficult to do them the week of spring break when you're on vacation with children. I have no more lame excuses. So I have tried to be a little bit proactive and put an outline together of the Finance Committee introduction, which is essentially the first few pages of the Finance Committee report that's going to get mailed. I will send this to you tomorrow, but I'm going to go over it. And really what I'm going to ask you to do is just review it. If you have inputs items that you would like included, that you just send them to me. And I'm going to use my discretion. I'm either going to include them or not include them. I don't take, in most cases, I think as most of you will say, that if you provide me an input, I'm going to at least have it discussed and considered. So, I'm not going to be dismissive of anybody's input. So here's what I have so far.
Can I just ask one, is that the synopsis you asked us to send to you?
No, there's probably about a 1 or 2 page, depending on how many charts and tables I add. There's 1 or 2, maybe even 3 pages up front that gives the overall budget health of the town that I write. And if you've been to select board meeting, which I know a number of you have, there's at least one person, Mr. Duffy, and several others that want more. They want, and I think he's right. I think he's owed more of an explanation. It's kind of a synopsis of the big issues that we've been discussing, other than just a bunch of charts and tables, because this will be in there. There just needs to be a narrative that supports this.
Right.
So that's the challenge. I'll have an intro. I will give a big picture issue of challenges, which include sped increases, which include internal faculty that needs to be added, faculty or staff, as well as out-of-district tuition increases. I will talk about COVID aid that is stopping, that's causing a little bit of fluctuation in the budgets, as well as some of the inflationary issues, especially for expenses. I will reiterate, because if you follow some of the discussion on the public forum, which I know some of us, are smarter and they don't necessarily pay as much attention to it, some of the comments, but I will reinforce that we have a balanced budget. We're not the federal government. We don't print money. Our budget is balanced, and that includes I will talk about taxation, I will talk about debt service, and then I'll go into costs and revenues. The breakdown of costs obviously is back to some more specifics on the town and school budget growth, 6% and 4%. Essentially, there are no above service level requests except for a couple of items, the Council on Aging hours, and there's also a bit of above service level request for the IT department, if you recall, full-time IT. There's no increase in that line, in the budget line, in the cost line, but there is decrease in revenue that we would normally get from Norfolk if and when that happens. So that's how the budget's proposed. I will speak to balancing of enterprise fund and indirect costs and efforts that are being proposed and being made there. Contractual increases comprise a lot of the increases, especially, year to year on both sides. That happens all the time with union or collective bargaining agreements. I will speak briefly on those, and then I'll get into a little bit more detail on school increases. Again, I mentioned up front the SPED increases, but I will go into some more detailed explanation of those, as well as contract increases. I'll switch to a short narrative on revenue, which includes new growth, also the free cash discussion and what is going to happen with the free cash, and capital. I'll talk about the capital projects. And I will also spend some time talking about the impact funding, the marijuana impact funding, and including the fact that that is a finite duration on that funding as opposed to the tax revenue, the sales tax revenue. And then I'm going to I'll close with some future needs, future discussion, which will include Tri-County, the Tri-County discussion, the Millis Middle High School renovation and repairs, the MSBA project. I'm not going to go into too much in depth on those because I think it's more for awareness and putting that out there. There's likely should be I don't have it here, but some discussion on PFAS and kind of another big ticket issue, and maybe some inclusion of some of I know that the Capital Planning Committee report is included in the Finance Committee report as well, so I'll reference that. I'm not going to restate everything. So if there are any ideas that you have, things that you definitely want included, you feel free to discuss them now, or feel free to email me before Friday or before Saturday.
I think you have a heck of a challenge to keep that brief enough, that people will read through it. So I applaud you, and I'm glad I don't have to write that. The other thing that I would say is try not to make it too scary, because we do need support from the town on some of these articles, and they take 2/3. So I just caution you to do the balance between reality and
Make pretend.
and a dire situation.
Okay.
Well, he's going to make sure he puts his King of Spades or his King of Clubs card on and off with their
I'm going
heads.
to, make no doubt about it that when it comes to the budget, the operating budget, I will make sure that I talk about the alternatives that, if you don't vote for this, you need to know what the alternative is. The alternative is not just not do stable, not to pick on, your discussion comments, but it's not, vote down Article 5 and then everything's fine. If you don't vote for Article 5, you have choices to make, and they have to be made then and there. And I will brief, either in this or in my discussion comments, I plan to drive that home, that this is the best of the worst solutions. It's the least, less of evils, so.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cron?
It has nothing to do with your comments, but if I remember correctly from the town meeting booklet in the fall, I think I noticed that the FinCom recommendations were separated almost as an appendix. My suggestion would be that we put our recommendations right under the warrant motion, so that they don't have to go from one section to the other, that it would be illustrated right there, so there'd be the warrant article and then the FinCom recommendation right up. That would be one suggestion I have.
Do we have license to, I believe we do, to structure it any way that we want? The motions aren't in the, really we're tied to, the only thing our hands are somewhat tied on is the motions, which aren't included in the Finance Committee report. But the listing of the warrant, I'm not sure if we can have our recommendations right after each warrant, because the warrant is the Select Board's document.
Right, but we make the recommendation, so the warrant would be there, and then it's the recommendation of the Finance Commission by a vote of 9-4 to vote approval, and then the little blurb on it. I've seen it in other warrant books. I know it's not unusual. I think it's more unusual that we have it separated in another area where they may not find it. In fact, somebody like myself who actually knows about this stuff, I didn't notice. I was looking for it. I'm like, where are the FinCom recommendations? So, it fooled me a little bit first time with a Millis warrant article, a warrant booklet. So that's my suggestion.
I can certainly check with town council. I think as long as the article itself wasn't.
It could be boxed. We could
wasn't-
put a box
wasn't
around
altered.
it, and that way it's very
And
clear.
you have listed in there, you know, the quantum of vote, the submitting party, you know, and then underneath that, it probably could say whatever the finance
Mike, I can
committee's
send you an
recommendation
example of
was.
one, if you
Yeah,
want it.
and certainly that, it's your flyer. I can certainly double check with with our town council to make sure there's nothing
Yeah, I
that
sent
we're
one
not
to you,
aware
so
of.
if you want to pass it
I
on
will.
to him.
I will.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to be writing it, so Deirdre and I will be, this is our,
Okay.
whether Deirdre likes it or
I
not.
sent
She and I will be working on this.
so you can share
Okay,
it with you.
I don't see a problem, but I would just want to confirm with council. that's
Okay.
all.
Could you think that's possible to get that to me by tomorrow?
I could certainly do that by the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay,
yes.
okay, thank you.
End of a long day.
Okay.
Mr. Chair? Oh,
Ms. Harden?
Lisa Harden, Town Clerk. I think if you're including this document in your flyer, that you can't really change it, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't have all these warrant articles, just as they're written, in another section with your comments. But I think, you know, you're including a posted warrant at the end of your report. So I don't really think you can change a posted warrant.
So I'll just say thank you. I think you have a good suggestion, and I'm going to work with town council and considering examples and see if we can come up with because I understand what she's saying. It's their document, and it's not just parts of their document, it's the whole document. But perhaps there's a way to add a boxed recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, the warrant booklet is sent out to everybody. So yes, the warrant is filed and noted, and that doesn't change. But the warrant booklet's a completely different thing.
So we'll get there. We'll get there, I think. Okay. Any more comments, questions? Please just send, if you have something you want included or excluded from the intro, please let me know.
Is now the time to talk about what you and I had just briefly discussed about the actual, at the meeting itself, or is wait for another time?
We'll do that right after this discussion.
Mr. Chair, would you like some updates to the glossary?
What kind of updates?
There's a few figures in some of the defined terms which can be updated. It's not extensive, and sometimes there are other, there are articles that refer to specific new Mass General laws, and we try to insert that into the glossary so that folks know what it is in reference to.
Is the glossary part of our policy and procedure document? Or is it separate?
It's generally part of the FinCom report.
But is it part of our policy document, our procedures document?
I don't believe so.
Okay. The reason I ask is because if it were, that's a voted document.
Correct.
But we could put something in italics that say, you know, this is the current, whatever, current figure, whatever. So yes, so I would
Okay.
like it, and I'll verify if it isn't. I think you're right, but I'm not certain on it, so yes, if you have updates.
We've typically made edits for the May town meetings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Especially during the pandemic when we had ARPA funds and a
Right.
lot of new terms that had to be defined.
Okay. So again, please email me what you have. I will, I'll definitely consider those. Okay? Next item on the agenda is board and committee liaison updates. Nothing? Jody doesn't want to tell everybody, but she is going to be a celebrity soon because she's working on a video with the rest of the 3A MBTA
Oh, cool.
committee. Informational, I assume, so.
All I did was come in and do the voiceover. Nick has done the majority of the work.
We'll know it's your voice.
But that's
Millis
another-
Community Media
Angelic
is the
voice.
ones doing most
Yeah.
of the
I
work.
didn't say
So we will be looking for that. And I want to thank all of you for attending those committee meetings. I know that hopefully they'll slow down a little bit for you soon, but maybe not, as we heard tonight from Mr. McKay. You know, the real work on getting changes and improvements, in my opinion, can't be done the month before town meeting or the week before town meeting. There's a lot of hard work that has to be done up front, And so I applaud you and I thank you for attending those meetings, participating, and coming back to keeping us informed. Minutes approval.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Garzon.
I move that we recommend approval of the minutes from the April 5th Finance Committee meeting with the exception of the first line, which is missing the date of April 5th.
Second?
Oh,
You always do it perfectly, you just missed the number 5.
It's been moved and seconded that the committee vote to approve the minutes from the April 5th as amended with April 5th.
Discussion?
Discussion.
I just want to state that 5 single-page, 7 font document was correct, except for the date, so thank you.
Yeah. And I'll just say, we definitely appreciate all that Deirdre does for us. I use these extensively during the writing of said introduction and report that we just talked about, because I need to refer back. I unfortunately have in past have reviewed the recordings, whether it be Zoom or Millis Community Media rebroadcasts. I'd much rather read this than listen to me, as I'm sure you would. So, anyway, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 9-0. I will take a motion.
I move we adjourn?
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a,
Not that motion.
so Mr. Crone had a recommendation that I'm going to take up with, I'm not sure who I'm going to take it up with. His recommendation is that we not severely, I don't want to color it that way. Why don't you characterize it?
So at town meeting, we read the warrant article and in its entirety, and then the FinCom recommendation is read the entire warrant article in its entirety again. My recommendation is to do what some other towns do, and that is to waive the reading of the warrant article or waive the reading of the FinCom recommendation. Now, that doesn't mean that a FinCom member can't then explain what they're talking about, but it eliminates one whole reading of the warrant article. There's no need to really repeat them twice. Now, someone may say, well, town council may be upset with that. You could vote, town meeting can vote to waive the reading of either the recommendation of the FinCom or waive the reading of the warrant article. The warrant article is succinct. What's that?
I think we typically do.
We do.
It's one of the
I
first
heard it
motions up
twice
front.
on every article.
It's typically one of the first motions that's made up front, and Brutus typically asks for a vote on waiving reading of the warrant.
But we read it.
We read the motions.
we went the motion.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
I don't know, you can't waive both.
Well, no, I mean, the motions are the warrant. So maybe I'm getting it.
No.
No, they're not. Like these, the warrant does not include this.
Well, okay, all right, I meant the warrant article.
The only thing that we are saying when we are speaking is the motion.
Because I remember the warrant article being read twice. So the full warrant article was being read, and then the motion was being read, and it was the exact same thing, because it has to recite, we felt they had to recite the warrant article. We don't need to read it twice. That's my recollection of it. I think I'm right on that, but if I'm wrong, tell me.
Ms. Harden, from a microphone.
Lisa Harden, Town Clerk. I just spent quite a bit of time doing the minutes from the last 2 town meetings for the town report. And we do, and I've also
We do what?
attended- I did the minutes
No,
for
you
the last 2.
said, you said, and we do what?
We do vote at the beginning of every meeting to waive the reading of the warrant articles and refer to them by number and subject matter. And then the planning board, finance committee makes their motion, and there's discussion.
There is
and-
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but after the motion is made, the moderator does sometimes synopsize what has just happened, similar to sometimes I do. And maybe that's what you're referring to as kind of the second time, because then there's a lengthy discussion, depending on the, the topics.
No, that was fine. No, that's
Okay.
what everybody does.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
My recollection was we read the warrant article, and then the FinCom made their recommendation and read the motion in its entirety, which included the warrant article. So sometimes you even have where, the moderator says, this is Article number 3, the synopsis, the FinCom has recommended by a vote of 7 to 2, approval. Is there any discussion? And there's really no need for the FinCom to make a motion. Sometimes you've seen it where all motions are by the chair and seconded by the vice chair. It's just a way of, it's something to consider. It's just,
I agree.
The moderator.
I am all in favor of improving. Let me just give you I've already told Mr. Cron what I'm about to say, and that is, much of this is at the discretion of the moderator, who is, our elected moderator will not be, I'm told, will not necessarily be at this town meeting. He is he won't be able to be there. So we'll have an alternate moderator. I think what I would recommend we do is we typically always have a meeting with the moderator, with town council, with the reps from select board, perhaps one town administrator, and we have kind of a logistical and a meeting to go over that. And I would invite you, and we would potentially talk about that.
That's fine.
And if we can my point is that my long-winded point is that it might be hard to implement change, given that we have the alternate moderator. It may be easy to implement change because we have an alternate moderator. I just don't know. So we'll leave it at that. And
That's fine.
so I will include you in
Thank
that
you. I
meeting.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Take a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.